My name is Dev, and there we go. And I advise and run a number of creative artist-run businesses. Bodhi, Green River Project, Juxtapose, and Sorted Library, which is my organization that I started all about preserving and promoting private libraries. And I'm just so grateful to be here getting to talk about books and reading, because it's actually how I end up doing everything that I do. And it's the thing that's behind the scenes that only my close friends really are the people I talk to about it. And today I get to bring it to all of you. So reading as a way of living. So we were taught to read in this way from schools that is really kind of horrible. It's like we are memorizing the book, given to us, we don't really choose it, and then we try to summarize it all, regurgitate it, get the few bullet points, and then the next morning, bring it to the page, spit it out, and kind of forget about it. And in our business life, we often actually read the same way. So we are reading either like a 1,500-word magazine article, a 50,000-word book, and we kind of do the same thing. We take it in, read it. Sometimes you're reading quickly if it's a business book. Entertainment, a little bit different, all good, but you're just kind of summarizing it, bringing it back down, trying to bring it down to a 200-word conversation maybe over a dinner, and then maybe the next day you're at the office, and if you're really good, you might tweet it out in 140 characters. And it's the same energy, and it feels honestly so reductive. Such a shame, that somebody's work is just brought all the way down, and all our whole task is just to understand exactly what they're saying, summarize it, and simplify it. When I look at books, I think about it that every book is 2 years of work for that author, at minimum. That's the bare bones, even if you're writing really quickly and you're researching. Most of the time, it's 11 or 12 years, or it's a whole lifetime of work. All leads up to this book. This is my library at home. This was taken yesterday. And there's probably, I know, there's around 1,100 books here. And whenever I see this, I just think to myself, 1,100 is 2,200 years of human labor, of thought. That if I was to look at this in the morning and I'm if there was one person that was sitting there, that would have gone back, they would have had to start when Cleopatra was reigning Egypt in order to produce what I bought $20 for a book, or $1 at a library book sale. It's completely grounding and honoring. And when I see these shelves, I have this metaphor that I use, which is kind of the baseline thing that I understand, that you need to understand in order to read a different way. And that is, you think about a book as a room. So each book is a room that you walk into and you feel something different. There's some books that feel like churches, that are more reflective or calm or spiritual. There's others that have big windows that enable you to see further, see into a place you've never seen. There's others that are filled with other books, and those are the books that you end up with a long list of things to research, to follow. But each room, you feel something different depending on the quality. And we know this in our gut. We actually really understand what it means to think differently when you're in a space like New Lab here than when you walk into a small, tight bar. You think something different. You feel something different. And I look at my library in the morning and I think to myself, 2,000 different or 1,100 different rooms that I could walk into. 1,100 different things that I could feel, different ways that I could feel, and I show up differently in each of those rooms. So what do you do? What do you do with all those rooms? And how does this tie to reading is living? So there's three ways of reading that I kind of want to talk about that are a little bit different than the way that we've learned. The first one is reading books as a trampoline for the imagination. So this is a quote that I just read last week by this fellow named Roger Grenier, who's like a publisher, French writer. And he said, books are a trampoline for your imagination, which is just like this amazing metaphor. Just like you're just bouncing into new places, And there's the pithy quote of like you can only see as far as the headlights, but you can drive across the whole country that way. That's kind of like our imagination. Our imagination works that way. We can kind of like imagine the future, but we really only imagine what we've seen of our friends. We only imagine what, just a little bit further, but we can't really see something different until we go somewhere else or in a different room. And when you think about books as room, you actually have to do something different when you're in there. And that is you have to ignore the writer. So you pick up a book, you enter this new space, and now forget about what they are talking about. You are not trying to understand. You are not trying to make sure you get to the real truth of it. You're there to witness yourself in their space. Ignore the writer. And that's what will actually enable you to pay attention to your imagination in this new space and dream and think further. It's almost like you're seeing who you are amidst a new place. And there's 2,000 or 1,100 new places right so easily accessible. And you don't know where you're going to end up when you start thinking like this. Oftentimes, honestly, my marginalia, like what I am writing in the margins of the books, is so disconnected from what the book is about. Like I'll be flipping through, and it's a completely different idea that has nothing to do, but somehow something jostled free in my mind. Just being there, just reading the page, and that idea just arrives. It's kind of like an act of faith. So these magazines here, let me talk about these. So this is a bunch of different rooms or different books that I absolutely loved my own thoughts when I started reading them. So I started with the Whole Earth catalog, which is up there, sort of in the back. And we just recently acquired this land. So I was thinking about land, and I was thinking about what room would I want to walk into, and how would I want to think about owning and tending to land and property. And so I started with Whole Earth catalog, and it led me to these other places, and I found this magazine called Country Woman magazine, which is almost like a feminist response to the Whole Earth catalog, 1970s, communes, California. And I loved my thoughts when I was reading these. They were grounded. I felt empowered. I felt like I could do it, that I could create things, that I could manage and tackle the problem. And so I took it even one step further. I found out that Country Woman magazine was produced in a small town in California, and the actual site that it was produced on was initially a commune for a few years, but that it had been turned over to an artist, an LA-based artist who kept it going in a different form, and I could actually go there. And so I took it one step further, and I went with my wife, and we spent a week there with like an outhouse, shitting in a bucket, looking at the redwoods, and also chopping our own wood, but on the land. And I was there in the physical version of the book, just witnessing my own thoughts and thinking. And I left with one metaphor, which was a property is like a living organism. It's something that needs tending, it needs caring, it needs noticing, that there needs a walking, that there's no point of arrival, that there's no finish. It is about care. And I left with that metaphor, and it actually changed my way of thinking about our construction timelines. It changed the way that I thought about where we were going to arrive and when we were going to host people and how I was going to talk about it. And it, most importantly, changed how I was feeling about the whole prospect of building a library and doing a land-based project. And I never would have arrived there. I never would have arrived to that idea if I hadn't trusted my ability to walk into a room and pay attention to my own thoughts. The second way of reading is read books to sustain inquiry. We're taught to answer quickly. It's kind of the world we live in right now. You know, you have a question, we go to Google, we quickly find the answer. Great, got it, know when that person was born, awesome, move on, next thing. But something is different. There's a different quality to the answers we receive when we hold a question. It's almost like an embodied way of knowing. It's like it actually seeps into our actual way of living. When we just don't rely on that first answer, don't just accept that the first answer is everything, and we hold on to a question. In fact, it happens in the world today. So it happens in art and academia all the time in the best case scenarios. You know, artists seeking context, understanding that there's always work that comes before, that they are always one in a series of people that have addressed the same question. In academia, people hold questions over the course of years. But in the business world, we don't do it. We're often hold a question until we get paid, or until we find out it's not efficient enough, that we found a good enough answer to move on to the next thing. And what happens when you slow it down and slow down your ability to arrive at an answer is you end up realizing different directions that you can follow momentum. And I started noticing how momentum and holding a question are related to each other through a practice that I've had, which was building a course pack. So I've done this since 2005. So I started with magazine articles when I used to read magazines and not the internet. And I would cut magazine articles out, throw them in a drawer, and then once a year, I would take all the magazine articles, usually around Christmas time when I was sitting at home, and I would be photocopy them all and turn them into a course pack. And then as obviously I moved away from reading magazines, I created a thing called course pack folder in my favorites. I'd add articles I loved, and then I printed all those articles out and got them bound. So this was 2010 to 2013 from the internet. And what I started noticing was that holding a question doesn't mean holding one question. It means paying attention to, as the question shifts, you're following a trajectory. And just putting people in these books, I realized all these threads in my life, and I would meet people that I never would have remembered. You know, you read an article about somebody, and it's done, you're on to the next link, it's done. But then me slowing it down, putting it into this course pack, enabled me to remember. I was like, oh, you're the person in my book. You're the person that I put in this course pack. And I would actually be able to meet people, I would see different opportunities, and I would understand and recognize different threads in my own life. Today, I have, this is probably one of the most exciting things that I've currently done with a little more resources that I have access to now. This is everything I've read on the internet in the last 5 years. And I actually got it laid out fully in book format, which I'm going to publish for myself, but because the copyright's obviously totally impossible. Here's a French ornithologist and composer. That's their Wikipedia page. But it is amazing to see. You know, it is absolutely, this is about 1,000 pages of the internet over the last 5 years. And just to experience what it's like now to have the internet on my shelf and choose that as a room that I get to go walk into and consider on any given morning. And when you hold a question for that long, the other thing that happens is it gives you a sense of faith. A faith that comes from knowing that there is a long line of people that have come before me that have asked the same question and arrived at maybe the same answer, but dramatically different answers as well. That I am always connected to people that have come before me, to thinkers and ideas and art and books that have come before me. And it is so grounding and so affirming. It changes how I act in business every single day because we live in a world that is constantly new, where there's constantly new things, new opportunities, and everyone is standing from a place of new. But to know inside that nothing is ever new, that these questions are old, enables you to sit in the face of that and answer in a very detached, grounded way. The third and final way, oh my gosh, I got one more thing to say about this. I forgot. So I wanted to tell you about holding a question, so time. So I got really involved in time. This is an example of holding a question and how it actually translated into a business that I'm working on. So I was thinking about time pre-pandemic, like how do we change our philosophical relationship to time? What does it mean? How do we move through it? And I spent 2 years reading all these time books. I went to the Greenwich Mean Line in England to like see what I thought when I was there. And I just dove into time-related things and chose all kinds of different rooms to walk into. And then during this, I decided that it wasn't going to be a book that was the outcome of it. It was actually, I met this guy that was starting a clock company or had a clock company. But it wasn't a normal clock. It was a kind of clock that changed your relationship to time. And it worked. It worked on me, and I was like, oh my God, right away, this is the thing I need to do. So I scrapped the book idea, and I decided to invest and play an operational role in helping this guy bring this clock to the world. And I can't tell you about it yet because it's not quite out there in the world yet. But it is like, I would never have been so decisive. There is no way that if I had read one book on time or Googled the history of time or read any single one of these individual books, I would have just like, oh, interesting, great, and left. But then when I met this guy, by a chance encounter, I was like, this is it. And I knew right away that this was a thing that I needed to help bring to the world. And so I did, and I am. And it changed the actual business decision that I'm making, or the business that I'm investing in and working with. So, number 3, having faith in the mind as a combining machine. So the mind as a combining machine was a line from a Nicholas Carr, The Shallows. He wrote the book The Shallows. And it was one line in there, and he says, our brains are combining machines. They're able to take two diverse ideas and bring them together. And I love that. And I haven't stopped thinking about it since I read that line. Because it just takes trust. It takes trust that you can read really, really broadly. Like, you're not trying to read for what you think you want to know. You're trying to read to put things into your mind and see and trust and take a back seat and let your mind do the work of combining these ideas. Sometimes you enter a room where you don't even understand what's going on. It's like you cannot figure it out. Like people are speaking a different language. And in those cases, it's the same feeling. It's like you're stepping back, maybe yawn, make yourself feel comfortable. slowly you start to understand, you pick up a few things that are going on, and you pay attention to your own thoughts. So there was this one book that I have that I read recently, Principles of Cerebral Mechanics. And so this guy, like 1800s, inventor, everything he wrote was kind of disproven, like not exactly like, not relevant. It was like kind of about, like he was trying to understand how our eyes work. Like just to give you a sense here, this is the beginning of a chapter, you are not missing any context. In order to proceed to the construction of systems by their functions, and because specific perception comes first, we must begin by determining the exact correlations between perceived species. You know, it's like that. It's like just goes on. And it's like does not like resolve itself, you know? In fact, the book, he didn't even finish writing. It just ends with ... like mid-sentence. And, but I sat with the book and I read the words he wrote and I sat in his room and I left with this idea that there are two ways of solving a creative problem. You know, there's from the facts that you have and then building your way up, and then from a total fictional standpoint and then building your way back down, which is what he was doing. And I applied that idea, that simple idea, which was not what he was saying, but it came up, it became apparent to me when I was paying attention to my own thoughts, and I applied that idea at work the next day. But that took an act of trust. It took a real act of faith. Because what you actually control is what you put in. That's it. You control how diverse the information you decide to put into your mind. And you control the energy of that information. So what you are choosing, why I picked up this book, how it came into my life, and why I decided to put it in. You control that. And this is why I absolutely love private libraries. Because private libraries make visible somebody's world. They make visible the rooms they chose to walk in, the thoughts, the background to their thinking. And these are some that at Rogers Library in Arco Santi was like one of the original members of Arco Santi, and you walk in and you feel the books that are both related to the landscape of the place and also like his love of sports. It's totally just the background to someone's living. Sitter work is St. Gallen, which was at an Artist Foundry, which is a private library at Artist Foundry. And this is Larry McMurtry's library in Archer City, Texas, which is one I really want to go to one day. But private libraries have this ability for us to interact. So that's why I started Sorted Library, to preserve and promote it. So the cards that you wrote on, if you did the book swap, are just one small way that we help people interact with them. So instead of going to a library and just taking pictures, and like, wow, this is a nice space. You know, what do I do here? What we do is have these cards, so you're going and you're asking a question that you have within their context. You're searching for your answer within their library. And some of the collections that we work with, some of the people we now have had hundreds of people do this exercise. And we actually take on creatives' estates and we'll make catalogs. So we're working on producing our first catalogs of all the books that they had. So if we can't preserve and actually keep all the books they had, at least there's a catalog of the books that they had for the next generation. Some way to search within their context. I really hope that after talking about reading as living, that you pick up a book and you enter someone else's room. I hope that you pay attention to your own thoughts. I hope that you get to build a library for yourself that is 1,000 rooms wide. Because every single morning, when I wake up and I see my books, I feel this absolute sense of both groundedness and possibility. And I know that it will give you everything that you need. The question, the faith, the direction you go, and whatever comes out of that tremendous mix, I hope will be your next great work. Thank you guys so much.